Is your presence personal? Hello and welcome to the 158th edition of the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. This is your home on the web for free resources to help you sell mo better. Straight talk, no hype, no BS. I ask the questions that others will not ask. That's why you always hear on my interviews people say, hey, that's a good question, or hey, you're really good at this, because I ask the things that I want to know. And you know what? I assume I'm like you, and you want to know them too. Now, along those lines, I mentioned in the last episode, session 157, a cool new tool I've been using, made by a cool guy, John Ferrara, that I had on the Sales Podcast here as well. He is the original founder of Goldmine, the old school CRM back in the day, baby. And he sold that, and he started a new company recently called Nimble. And actually, Mark Cuban, the Mark Cuban from Shark Tank, is a backer. He's an investor in this. They're calling it a social CRM, but it's really a lot more than that. And you can check it out yourself at thesalespodcast.com/nimble. Go and give that a whirl. Let me know what you think, because connecting today is the same as it always has been. And it's about connecting. It's about remembering that the person at the other end of the table, of the negotiating table, of the test drive, the other end of the computer screen, of the phone, of the SMS text, the other end of your book that you may be writing, that's a human being, okay? And I help human beings sell to human beings. And our guest today, Dianna Booher, is also an expert at helping you connect, helping you have that personal presence, a powerful personal presence. John, with Nimble, helps you do the same thing, and he helps you do it quickly. That's the cool thing. It's this browser-based. It follows you anywhere on the internet, so it works if you're on LinkedIn or Twitter or any website, email, Gmail. You can hover over the person's contact info, over their email address, and boom, it pulls them up. It's like magic. Then you can add them right into the CRM. Then you can tag them. You can label them. You can create opportunities, things to follow up on. It's really pretty cool. So check out, again, thesalespodcast.com/nimble. That'll help you maintain your presence online. And now let's bring on Dianna so you can establish your presence everywhere else, including online. Dianna Booher, fellow Texan, all the way from Texas. Welcome to the Sales Podcast. How are you?
I'm fine. Great to be with you, Wes.
Now, I'm going to try the impossible, because you and I could probably talk for 17 hours. But you are the author of 46 books. Goodness gracious. You're a member of the NSA, right? The good NSA, National Speakers Association, not the NSA that spies on us, correct?
That's right.
All right. Whew.
I always have to clarify that.
Man, although I probably need to have one of them people on the show just to tell us what they're spying on. But it's probably everything, so we know that answer. But for those that don't know you, would you mind take a minute or two, kind of tell us how you got started? How did you end up writing 46 books? And then we're going to dive down the rabbit hole so I can pull out some little gems from you to help our listeners grow.
Well, actually, I just wanted a way to stay at home and not have to get up and get in that Houston traffic where I know you spend a lot of time.
Oh, my gosh. I am still, my kids even know. They're like, they think I have PTSD when it comes to traffic. And I'm like, hey, if you made that commute like I did, you would too. You would avoid traffic at all costs.
But it's been my no marketing plan.
Oh, gotcha.
I thought, you know, how can you really promote your business and not have to get on the phone? Because I started out a long time ago when you could actually get on the phone and catch people and they didn't have on their voicemail or email. But I didn't want to do that. You know, I didn't want to actually ask people. And I thought, what can you do in our culture to make people actually call you, to have people flooding you in your business and asking you to come out and talk to them? And that's either you can be a pro athlete, you can be a movie star, or you can write books. Gotcha. And so that's how I started my business. And I said, I'm going to become an expert in my topic, which was communication skills. And then I'm going to write the book on it and literally become the expert, go out and find people who are executive levels, vice presidents, senior vice presidents, and ask them, what is the problem in your organization with communication?
Right.
Get them to tell me, collect documents, listen to presentations, and become the expert, write the book on it. And then once that's released, the publisher sends it out, and media sends me out to do book tours. People will start calling me, and that's exactly what happened. So that was it.
Now, what was your background? I mean, did you have a degree in marketing or communication?
I have master's degree in English literature and in writing, actually. And so I went to Shell Oil. I went to Enron, was in business back there at that time, ExxonMobil. And I had friends in those organizations. And I said, what do people do wrong? What is really just killing your organization about engineers who try to get up and make a management presentation?
Right.
And they just started ticking off things. You know, they get down in the weeds. They give you too many details. They take too long to get to the point, etc. And they gave me documents. And so I collected those. And my first business book was on business writing. And then I did one on technical writing and on presentation skills. And so those just went like wildfire. And when I did a presentation when the first book came out, the Houston Chronicle did a big story on it. And I had 32 calls by noon the next day.
Wow. Once
they ran that story. And I just began working by word of mouth, people seeing the books and calling me. And even today, I think at one point, I haven't done this in a while, but at one point we had about 87 or 88% of our business came directly from the books.
Right.
Books or an article written about the books.
Well, I like to play devil's advocate and take away any objections my listeners might have. And you kind of glossed over it. And I want to go back because some will say, oh, well, you started years ago, times have changed, and you even alluded to that before we turned on the recorder, and I'll touch on that in a second. But what you did was you played to your strength. Now, you had experience in English and writing, so communication, but you went, you're in Texas, so you went to the big employers in that area, which were oil companies, and you also had friends in those organizations, right? And you simply contacted people that you knew at companies that had money. Is that a safe summary?
Yes, and they weren't friends who could hire me. I guess they could, but I didn't ask them to hire me,
right? Because
I didn't want to impose on the friendship. But I asked them, I said, what are the problems?
Sure.
So I began investigating my market and asking them, what are the problems? Because then I knew what I needed to solve.
Yep. Well, but the important thing is if you're good at what you do and you have good friends that know that you're good at what you do, they don't mind investigating a little bit and saying, hey, boss, I have a friend. She's really good at communication skills. Do we have a need for that, or who should she talk to? And the next thing you know, doors get open. Even if it's nothing more than to be friendly and reward a good employee. Okay, I'll talk to I'll take a 15-minute call, or we'll meet for lunch, and things get going. I think people try to make things too hard nowadays. Would you agree that it's just this communication thing, right? It's just be a decent human being, uncover their pain, and doors get open.
That's true. And this executive at Shell Oil did set an appointment after I said, I've written a book on this, and I have developed a training program on business writing. I didn't ask him to, but he just said, I've set up, if you'd like to talk to our training director, I've set up an appointment for you. And so then I was able to say, I have a book coming out, because I had already sent this to gotten an agent to sell the book, and they were going to publish the book, Simon & Schuster, and said, this book is coming out. It'll be about 8 months. Back then, it took longer to get a book out than it does now.
Right.
And so I was able to sell it with great credentials. But even I went to a different company to give me actual writing samples, and he was glad to collect them. I said, do you have terrible examples from your lawyers and from your accountants? And he says, oh, do we ever? And he happened to be the collector of records. I don't remember what his title was, but something in operations manager. And so for about 3 months, he just tossed these records into a file for me. So yes, you always can depend on friends to do that. And I talked to another guy who was going out on his own to become an entrepreneur, start his own office engineering services company. And anytime I had a problem in hiring good people as I built my own company, he was always willing to give advice. So I think people do invest in you if they know you're not imposing on the friendship.
Right. So you mentioned that to that person that you had created a training program around your book. How important is that nowadays to supplement or augment your book?
I think it's crucial. Once you write a book, and now everybody's writing a book. I mean, you look in Wall Street Journal, and every 2 or 3 weeks on their business page, they're talking about a new book that's published out there in the business world. That's how companies promote their employees. That's how businesses promote their services. That's how people get visibility as a high performer, is to write nowadays. And I think it's really, really important to do that. Your question again, Wes, was repeat your question to me again.
So how important is that to promote the book? And really, I think there's a big misnomer. I mean, people think, oh, if I just write a book, I'm going to be rich and famous. But in reality, it's a lead-in, just like with you, that you got business. And I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume, now you've written a lot of books, but you probably make more money from speaking and consulting and training than actual book sales. Is that inaccurate?
Yes, you were asking me the multiple ways that you use that. As soon as that book comes out, people are going to be asking you, what else can you do for me?
Right.
And that is the multiple revenues and the multiple formats that they want that information today is just mind-blowing. Even though the book still is the central thing that says you're the expert. I mean, people don't go out saying, I'm looking for an expert here. Who is the expert? I need somebody who's an expert on audio or somebody who's an expert. They look, first of all, for the book author. Right. And that's not all they buy. When they get ready to buy, they are looking for it because in multiple formats, because people, they want it in audio when they're jogging, when they're riding in their car, they're looking for a podcast or a DVD, or they're wanting somebody to come in and work with a whole team in a consulting way. Right. So they're going to consume it in a lot of different formats. But when they think expert, they still think book. So right. you just have to be able to know what you're doing and be able then to toss it out into the world in a lot of different ways.
Right. So let's focus for a second. Let's say somebody is a beginner. Maybe they have a book. Maybe they don't. Maybe they have a book that just hasn't really sold a lot, because most don't sell a lot. And, they're thinking, man, it's daunting enough to write a book. Now you're telling me I have to create a training program around it. But that is what they need to do. What could you tell our listeners how to get started with that? Like, how in-depth should this be? Should they plan on delivering it in person at first? Should this be a do-it-yourself or a train-the-trainer kind of program? I mean, what can you tell us about developing a training program around the book?
There are almost as many ways to do that, Wes, as there are books out there written.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a training program, actually. But if you want to do a training program as opposed to a step-by-step project, training programs happen to be the most lucrative, but you can put it online. Like, for example, I have an online program called Get Your Book Published Coaching Program. In fact, Get Your Book Published Coaching Program.com is where I have an online program. It totally exists because people were always calling me how to do it. But you can put it online. You can do it by webinars. Some people are still doing it by teleseminar. You can do it in group coaching calls. Some people do it one-on-one, having people come to their office and do it in a coaching format. There are just so many different ways. Some people teach it to a corporation. For example, they go into, and I've done this for years, go into a client like IBM. I teach it to their trainers, and then their trainers go out and teach it, and then they teach it to their vendors. Or you can teach it to your own trainers who go out and teach it, and you continue to use your own employees as your trainers or contract people. You can have franchises that do it. In Dale Carnegie style. There's just so many different ways to teach it. It's just probably, I've touched on about 10 or 12,
right.
And they're probably more than that.
So the main thing is focus on creating a training program, do whatever comes natural to you, and just get started.
Right. and the reason people wait so long to do it is that they think it's going to take 6 months or it's going to take a year or 2 years. And really, writing your book can be as short of a project as 2 or 3 weeks. In fact, most of my books have done in a couple of weeks. The longest, and that process is what I outline in that training program that I have online, 7 to 21 days is about the average that it takes.
Now, is that full-time writing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Full-time writing. And I'm not talking about a 4-hour day or a 6-hour day. I'm talking about an intense day, about 11, 12, 13 hours a day writing. But you get it done.
Right.
So it's easy to schedule. Some people schedule it during their vacation time. If they have another job, if they're a salesperson, they schedule it in their vacation. And if they've got a 4-week vacation, I mean, that's a piece of cake to get it done. And then that is their calling card. You open the door. If you're a salesperson, you open the door by saying, I'm the author of such and such book. And people listen to you because they know if you know enough to write a book on something and you get it published by a major publisher, if Penguin, Random House, Simon & Schuster have published your book, people know that you know what you're talking about, and they're much more willing to hear from you than if you just are, Joe Schmo out there or Joanna Smith,
right? And
they've never heard from you.
So should I bite the bullet and go get Penguin or somebody? Because I've got 2 self-published books, but part of it is because I just rebel at anything formal. If somebody told me it would take 8 months for me to get my book out, I would just hang up the phone and go do my own thing.
See, that's a misnomer. People keep saying that, but that's not how long it takes.
Okay.
Major publishers, that was a long time ago.
Okay.
It's like people talking about what the internet was 20 years ago. It takes a publisher about 5 months, 4 to 5 months to get your book out. But that's from starting the contract to finishing. If you are going to do the same thing, and do a quality job, not just junk, throwing junk out there. But if you are really going to write a manuscript, have a professional editor go through and clean it up so that it's not junk and get a quality cover done and get it up there, it's going to take you about 3 months to do it as well. So it doesn't take you much longer. But by that extra month or 2 that you're talking about, you're going to have major distribution throughout the world instead of just the people that you know and just online with Amazon. There are many, many more platforms. You're going to be able to sell sub-rights. You're going to have your book in a lot of different countries, and you're just going to pick up major distribution that you don't have when you self-publish.
Well, my understanding, though, is publishers now, if you're not known, they're saying, tell me how you're going to distribute. Basically, it's like, convince me why we should take your money to print your book to have you promote yourself.
That's what you get when you're talking to a what they call a partner firm, not a real publisher.
Okay.
A partner firm is what we used to call a vanity press. And when you're publishing with a major publisher, you don't pay them any money. They're paying you up front in advance.
Okay. So
that's
I've been doing this all wrong then.
Well, it may be what you would like to do, but a major publisher pays you an advance up front. They may pay you $25,000, $100,000, $300,000, they pay you up front. And it will take you about 5 months, 4 to 5 months to get your book out. And it will be professionally done, and it will be distributed around the world. And you'll have sub-right sales, and then audio sales and video sales. And then they do all the work. You write the book and send it to them. And then they will, though, expect you to market and hit your community, because many of those sales will be to the people you know. For example, you're well known as a podcaster, so they will expect you to advertise it to your fans and your followers and on social media, and go out. And if you're a speaker, go after your people that know you. Right. But they will have their own distribution channel that they bring to you as well. If somebody is asking you to pay them up front, you want to run.
Okay. Now, we have thousands of people listening to this podcast. And I mean, I've just heard so many horror stories of people, submitting a book proposal to 5, 10, 25 publishers and getting shut down. I mean, what you're saying, though, is if you get accepted by one of those 25 or 45, then that one will pay you. But there's no guarantee somebody's going to pick you up just because you have a proposal.
That's right. And the reason many people get turned down and think it's difficult is because they do not know how to do a proposal. Okay. And they do not do it well. Okay. And so that's the reason they come back saying, oh, it's terrible, it's impossible, you're not going to get picked up. They don't go through the learning curve. It's just like somebody saying, oh, it's impossible to become a speaker today. Well, that's because they never learn how. They never study the art of speaking. They never learn to be articulate. They never learn their topic. They don't learn. They just go out once and do a terrible job, get terrible feedback, and then walk away and say, audiences are terrible today. It's not possible to make a living as a speaker. And, of course, then that's the message they're giving.
Right. I ain't needing nobody to tell me I'm a gooder speaker.
So, again, they're speaking of their experience only.
Okay. So where can people learn to write a good book proposal?
Well, there are plenty of books on it. Obviously, I would like for them to go to my course on it, which is getyourbookpublishedcoachingprogram.com, and it will take them to my course, which is a very, very in-depth, step-by-step process on how to put together a book proposal. But there are a lot of, if you go to an agent's site, most agents that you might be interested in will have guidelines for what they want to see in a proposal. So that's a free thing. Now, obviously, they're not going to tell you how.
The agent?
Yeah, yes.
But they're going to take a cut,
you'll need to go to a major publisher, you'll need to go through a literary agent. Okay. And almost every agent is going to have what goes into a proposal on their website. Now, the problem is they're not going to go into detail about all the secrets to put in there. They're just going to say, give us your bio, and it should have a little marketing plan, what you're going to do to market your book. They just don't tell you the kinds of things to put in your bio and what not to put in your bio. They're not going to tell you what exactly should go in your little marketing plan. When they say, now give us an overview of your book, they're not going to tell you, well, what should go in that overview.
Right.
So, but they will give you some kind of guidelines about what they want to see in your proposal. What are the components of it? So, and then there are plenty of good books written on it. If you don't want to put out anything on a proposal, just go to some books on proposal writing. Michael Lawrence has a good book on it, how to write the good book proposal. Jeff Herman, Herman, has a good book on how to write the perfect book proposal. So there are great books out there on it.
Okay. What was your website for your book getting published?
Yes, it is getyourbookpublishedcoachingprogram.com.
Goodness gracious. All right. That's long.
It is, but somebody took mine. I had Get Your Book Published, and then had it every year, and somebody came along and I had bought it for 5 years, and somebody, in the day that it was not, somebody grabbed it, so I had to add coaching program to get that. It's getyourbookpublishedcoachingprogram.com.
Right. Very nice. Thank you for that.
Sure.
We'll be sure to link to that as well. So how do we know if we have found a good agent? What should we look for in an agent?
First of all, you want to look for one who doesn't charge you. If
Okay.
they charge you anything, they're not a good agent. You want to go somewhere else. You want to look for someone who is passionate about your work. It's very subjective. Being an agent, of course, they will tell you on their website what they like and what they don't like.
Okay.
If they don't do business books and you write business books, obviously you're going to go somewhere else. If they say, don't send me books on sales, then you're not going to go to their site.
Well, they shouldn't even be in business. You know what? They shouldn't exist. Okay, never mind. I digress.
But, and they will focus, for example, my expertise when I write business books, and I write in a lot of different areas, but most of my business books are on communication, leadership communication, executive communication, and then concrete practical skills in communication, like the speaking skills, presentation skills, etc. So sometimes you go to a literary agent and they will say business books such as sales skills, communication skills, etc. And they actually focus in that area. So look for those agents that really focus on your topic area. They'll know it very well. They'll know the editors. They'll know which publishers handle that, and they'll know the editors at those publishing houses that handle that topic. And that's where you want to go. And you can go to find a list of agents, go to authors, AAR.org, and that's Association of Authors Representatives, AAR.org. And you'll find a whole list of agents and how to contact them.
Okay, AAR.org.
.org. Yes.
All right, very cool. So, I mean, you have 46 books. What are your thoughts on having ghostwriters, or do you ever dictate any of your content and have it transcribed?
I do not.
Okay.
No, I just don't think that unless you. I prefer having a co-writer. Now, when you have a ghostwriter and you don't give them credit, I have a principle about that. Just an adverse gut reaction to that. To me, it's being deceitful.
Right.
Now, I know that many movie stars, politicians do that because they can't write.
Right.
But to me, they should always acknowledge them on the cover. And that's when you see the with line. You will see, for example, all those books that say, Mr. Celebrity with Joe Schmidt down there. And that with line says, that is my writer.
Right.
And then that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. It's telling you that this person up here has the experience or has the idea, the germ of the idea, but they can't write, and somebody else has writing skill, and they put the life story together. That's no problem. It's when the person who has the idea or a platform to sell the books doesn't acknowledge that person at all. And to me, that's deceitful.
Yeah. Yeah, there are so many gimmicks I see out there now with people. There was a friend of mine did this over a year ago, and I saw a client just post on Facebook the same thing. But so a year ago, she's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be out, in Southern California in a few months to get my best-selling author award. I'm like, did your book even come out? Did I miss it? Oh, no, it's coming out, but I'm with this program. They guarantee it'll be a bestseller. They do like this chicken soup for the soul thing, right? They get 25 or 35 authors. Everybody donates a chapter, and then they play some games, or everybody buys X number of books, and next thing you know, it's a bestseller based on some very narrow criteria, and they all get an award trophy, and and they get their picture in Hollywood. And I'm like, that just seems so cheap.
Yes, you can buy your way onto the bestseller list. I've written a blog about that as well. There is a firm, Wall Street Journal did a story last year, early in the spring. There is a company, I won't call their name on here, who you pay them. It used to be $25,000 a couple of years ago. It was $25,000. I don't know what it is now, and they will put you on their bestseller list. Mm-hmm. And they have people all around the country. Housewives, they give them a credit card. They all call in on the same day, and you're on the bestseller list.
Right.
So there's several ways that happens. So I am obviously not behind any of those, and I don't favor any of those.
What about, I've interviewed several well-known authors, speakers, trainers, but they have admitted it was their own content, but they would dictate it because they weren't great at a keyboard or what have you, and then have somebody transcribe it and then they clean it up. I mean, is that...
that is rarely just a cleanup. Most of the time, what they're doing is they're just transcribing whatever they say, just some content, right. And somebody totally rewrites it. Mm-hmm. They're rewriting, restructuring, adding content. They're just rebuilding the book.
Right.
So just telling somebody saying, "Oh, I just transcribed it," they just quote cleaned it up, is a vast understatement, a big, huge understatement.
Well, if somebody needs to do that, though, to get maybe their first book out, or if it is at least their ideas, and they give someone credit, I mean, is that a way to get started?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I mean, that's, as long as they're giving somebody credit for writing it, no problem, because they're being honest. They're just saying up front, and in fact, that's the way most movie stars would do it. That's, right. When the president writes a book, he's not going to sit down and write a book.
Right.
They're going to just say, and they've dictated. It takes the place, and it's much faster than being interviewed. You could have that ghostwriter sitting there interviewing, and it would take hours, but they can just pick up and just off the top of their head talk, and the person can take all that information and build them a book out of it.
Right.
That's what ghostwriters do. Or they can hand them all of their recordings, all of their speeches, all of their if they're a CEO of an organization, they can say, "Here, read all my annual reports and look at all those letters in there. Take all these hands-on reports, speeches I've given to the last 3 or 4 years to our annual shareholders meetings. Look at all this stuff. Here's all the information I can hand to you." And every time they go walking in the morning before they go to work or do a workout, they can have a recording going, and they just blow up, just
Sure.
blurt out information and say, "Here, go build a book out of that." That's what ghostwriters do, and that's fine as long as they put their name on the front of the book and say, Mr. VIP or Ms. VIP with
right.
Joe Schmo, who's the ghostwriter. No problem. That's what ghostwriters do, and people who buy the book understand.
Right.
It was the material and the content of the person up at the top, and the ghostwriter built the book out of that information.
Right.
Nothing deceitful about that. They get started, and that's fine.
Okay. So one of your more recent books is Creating Personal Presence.
Yes.
How do you make that shift from communicating skills, teaching some geeky engineers how to speak and write better? How do you make that shift into creating personal presence?
Well, many times the person who's the expert, as we've just been talking, is not the person who can communicate their expertise that well, whether it's writing, like we've talked about, or whether it's standing up in front of a group. And that's often the case with a technical person,
yeah.
An engineer, an accountant. Frequently, those two professions seem to have people who are very competent, but not very confident about their communication. Right. And so what I frequently do is record them and then help them analyze what they see. And many times they'll look at it and say, oh, that's boring. Oh, that's terrible. And so we take them from terrible to confident and articulate in a matter of a day.
Wow.
And the way I do it is to give them some general principles, model for them what confident and engaging looks like, and then have them practice it over and over, just like actor and producer or director if you were in a play. And once they do it over and over and they see the difference, many times they feel like, oh, man, this is over the top. This is terrible. This is just not me. But this is way too exuberant. And then I show them the video of it, and they say, oh, that looked great. I know I didn't look too over the top. And then they hear their voice. Oh, I wasn't in a monotone there. that had some inflection, and they began to see that it sounded great. It didn't look too exaggerated. Their hands were moving along with their voice. They weren't too big, and they didn't look like a cheerleader or a traffic cop. It really looked fine and engaged them. Then they sort of let themselves go and become natural.
Right.
And so the goal is really to get them to be their natural self in front of a group. And what happens, I try to tell them what happens. And they always say, well, I just want to be natural. I just want to be me. And what happens is most of the time they are their natural self when they're out to dinner with friends or when they're with their kids at McDonald's on Saturday. And they become their unnatural self when they stand up to present to their vice president.
Right.
And so my goal is to get them to relax and learn how to be as engaging in front of their CEO when they give a briefing as they are when they're with their spouse out to dinner.
Right.
And that's the goal. And that's executive presence. But they just have to do it on command, so to speak, when they stand up.
Right.
They have to know this is what I need to do. And then they have to know how to put together the content for a great presentation. And so many technical people they use their PowerPoint or whatever kind of software they're using as their notes. This is point 1, this is point 2, point 3, and that becomes their notes that they read from. And of course, that's deadly. So it's all about structure and the delivery. And then in Q&A, a lot of times they just fall apart during Q&A. So we teach them how to handle difficult questions, and that's pretty much think on their feet. Many times they don't know how to think on their feet and field questions with poise.
Right.
So that's the executive presence in a nutshell.
How do people come to you with that? Have they been stumped before? Are they just frustrated? Do they have a lot of good ideas, but they're not getting accepted? And they're like, why the heck aren't people taking my stuff? Because in a way, somebody has to have some self-awareness, right, that they need to improve in that area.
Yes, most of the time what's happened, either they've lost a big client, if they're a salesperson, they've lost a big client, and the boss has said, what happened to this account? Or they're having difficulty getting in to a big client. They've plateaued, so to speak, in their career. They can get into middle management accounts, but they can't get to the C-suite. And their boss is saying, if you're going to get promoted, you've got to bring in more business. You're not calling at the highest level. And when you call on the chief financial officer, the chief intelligence officer, the chief engineering, those C-level officers, you've got to have a little more presence about you. And some people just stall out in their career and they don't know why. The boss cannot pinpoint. A lot of times when that executive calls us and says, so-and-so, I'm going to send so-and-so for coaching. And I say, okay, well, what is the problem? Many times that C-level officer can't exactly articulate the problem. They'll say, well, they just need a little polish. And then I'll start to ask them specific questions. Oh, well, yeah, that's the problem. Well, yeah, they do get down in the weeds. Well, yes, they're very brilliant. And frequently they'll start with, well, they're brilliant, actually. But, and then they ramble when they get asked questions. Well, when we get into a group team discussion, they can't answer questions with authority. Or sometimes it's the way they dress when we're in a social situation. They just never seem to dress appropriately.
You mean clip-on ties and pocket protectors don't convey confidence?
They seem to have gotten that far, but I'll get questions or things like this. I remember one at a major defense contractor. The executive was talking to me there about a woman he wanted to send. And he says, when we go to really important dinners with officials in the government, she tends to always wear print rather than solid colors. Now, see that he was very sharp. He knew how to pinpoint something, but to communicate that to her, he thought it would hurt her feelings, and he really didn't know why. He knew it didn't work, right. And he knew that the others in the organization didn't dress like that, but she just always seemed to wear wild prints, and he couldn't give her an authority about why she never fit in.
Right.
And so sometimes it's so subtle that they don't know how to explain it. Right. And let me give you another example. I had one this chief financial officer that was sending me someone. He was a really big guy, and he said he just, the way he walks is just, it's just wrong, and I don't know how to tell him to fix it. Right. And he was huge, and he said, I don't know why, but I've been told I intimidate people, and he says that's why I slump. Well, the problem also was, and I saw him 2 different days, he always wore black. And I told him that added to the intimidation. He had never thought about it, sure, that dressing in black was more intimidating than a softer blue. And so it's just little things like that. And people don't realize how much it halts their career at a higher level. Lower level, it doesn't matter so much because so much is not at stake. But when you get to a higher level, it's those little bitty things that can make a huge difference.
Right. Well, you mentioned a lot of examples where someone is calling on behalf of someone else. What can an individual do on their own to recognize, basically, that they need you?
Well, the biggest sign, of course, is if you're not going anywhere. If your career is stalled and you're just not getting feedback, if your boss seems to be freezing you out, if people around you are getting the promotions and you're not, if you're not getting increased responsibility, those are big signs. Those are the main ones.
Okay.
That you know you need help. If you're not always increasing your quota, if you're in sales, if you're not getting the appointments that you need at that level, those are big signs that you need help.
Right. And would you say it's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it, or two sides of the same coin? I mean, the more you know, the more confident you can be. But at a minimum, you've got to be. Is it to a degree maybe the fake it till you make it? Like stand tall, be noticed, command the room. You do have to have that confidence, but I think that confidence has to be based on something. Sure. You
can't just. I'm not a proponent of the fake it till you make it. I think you need to know what you're doing so that you feel confident. Right. You can't just tell somebody, don't worry about it. It'll be all right. I mean, those are glib statements that you give to a 7-year-old. You can't do that to somebody.
Right.
So you have to assure them of what they're doing right and what needs to be improved. That gives them confidence that they're doing something right.
Right. Yeah, and it is, it's everybody's in sales. Right. I mean, even if you're just trying to get somebody to buy in to your viewpoint, get them to listen, to take an appointment with you, even if it's internal. I mean, we're all in sales, right?
That's exactly right. I've said that all along in all of my communication books, that every interaction that you have with someone is building that relationship. And all of our relationships, whether you're the entrepreneur or whether you're the entry-level person, is the sum total of all the interactions you've had with that person, just built, stacked end to end to end. And when I did this last book, What More Can I Say? It outlines 9 of those principles, why communication fails and what to do about it. And most people don't realize when they've had a failure, so they don't know what to do about it. And if you don't see a difference in how somebody believes or how they act, then you haven't changed them. When you speak, just because you've told them to do something or you've told them what to do, if there's not a change there, then you haven't gotten through to them. You might have communicated that message, but you haven't gotten through to them. So if you really intend to persuade them, whether it's creating a different sense of confidence or communicated something about their presence, then you've got to build that trust, the trust in themselves and the trust that you know what you want them to change. If you're the boss, you've got to communicate that trust so that they believe you enough to change their behavior.
So I love it how we started out. You got into your writing career so you wouldn't have to sell stuff, and now here you are writing books about selling.
Well, selling is it's really about communication. I know when I started at IBM, they were one of my first customers after I got through the oil field when I was had one of my books, a book tour, and they saw me and said, "Hey, can you come up and talk to us?" I had taught writing for IBM. And then they asked me to do presentations. And I said, well, I don't know enough about it until I write a book on it. So I wrote the book on it, and they had me teaching presentations. And then they came back to me and said, can you do customer service? And I said, well, I don't know enough about customer service. I haven't written a book on it. And they said, look, really, sales and customer service is communication. And that's what you already do. And I began to think about that. And I said, it really is. It's so much of everything that we do in the business world comes down to communication and sales. I didn't want to get out from under that umbrella of communication, which was my umbrella, but it's all about that. If you can't communicate well, you can't sell, you can't serve your customer, you can't market, you can't follow up. It's all about sales.
Right. And that's why you're on the Sales Podcast. So I want to, real quick, before we end, you'd mentioned a couple of names earlier, Jeff Herman, and who was the other individual that I missed?
Jeff Herman has a book on it, and Mike Larson had a book on
Mike Larson?
Rights. Yes, Michael Larson, Larsen, I think is his last name. Okay. And so if they didn't want to do the online program that I mentioned, those are two books they might go to.
And then you mentioned also I was trying to pull up the website, but it didn't come up, the AAR.org or something like that?
Yes.
Because that came up to like automobile or rail or something. I don't know.
It's Authors Association of Authors Representatives. So if you put in Association of Authors Representatives, it should take you to that.
Okay. And now for the most important thing. Where should we send people to learn more about you? You've got so much going on. I've got your main website, but should we send them to one of your book websites?
It's booherresearch.com.
Right. And it's BOOHER, Booher Research.
Booherresearch.com.
Okay. And then they can find you on Twitter as well at Dianna Booher.
Yes.
And that's your name everywhere, right? Facebook, yes. YouTube, Pinterest. So at least you locked those down. Nobody's stealing any more of your domain names, are they?
Right.
So any parting words of wisdom or advice you want our listeners as they hit end on this podcast before they listen to the next podcast or, go about their business? What should they do after listening to you?
No, I'll just have to give you the name of that book. What more can I say?
Very nice. I love it. Well, Dianna Booher from the great state of Texas, thanks for being on the Sales Podcast. It's been great.
Thank you, Wes. I enjoyed it.
How do you like that advice, huh? Show up at a big organization, leverage relationships, leverage the contacts you have, referrals, and then ask, what is going wrong? And then figure out how to solve the problem. It's the old adage, say yes and figure out how, right? People say, hey, can you help me? Yeah. And you're like, I really don't know. But if they have a big enough problem and there's a budget there, you can marshal the resources to help them solve the problem. Because think about it. If they knew how to solve the problem, they would have already done it. So if you are sincere and you're capable, even if it's something totally exotic, something crazy. So if somebody came to me and said, hey, can you help my, pet iguana learn how to sit up and bark? Now, granted, it's not a huge problem, but if there was a lot of money, I could say, you know what? Yes. And I'm going to go find, I don't know, the dog whisperer or the reptile whisperer. I'll call around. I'll find somebody to solve that problem. Okay. If it's a big enough problem. She did that. And I loved how Dianna talks about this was her no marketing plan, right? So now she writes like crazy. She's a speaker. She's putting herself out there. But because she's putting herself out there as an expert in writing, in the press, in the media, she's seen as an expert. And you always want to negotiate from a position of strength. So if you can write books, do podcasts, make videos, put yourself out there so people are calling you, then you can pick and choose. Okay, you can choose who to work with. You can choose who to lose, which is a big part of my sales training and my marketing. You need to know who you cannot help, who you don't want to work with. I had a guy just last week, just based on his email, and it was a one-sentence email, one-word headline. I could tell the guy was rude, and I had my assistant call him just to be sure. And I probably won't do that again. She emails me immediately and says, this guy is a jerk. And she used a meaner word than jerk. I called him, actually got him on the phone, and which I was surprised. And this guy had an attitude. And I'm like, I can't help you. And so it's nice to be able, again, to choose who to lose. But you can do that when you have a powerful personal presence, when you know who you can help, who you can't. Okay, so you've got to know yourself. Okay, you need to be competent. You need to be confident, but not arrogant. Okay, and get yourself out there. So like I always say, go back and listen to this. There's a lot of notes in there, a lot of little nuggets, things you'll glean over or skim past because life gets in the way. If you're like me, you're listening to these when you're driving or when you're at the gym. So, and if you're like me as well, I listen to these at double speed. So then I go back and I can listen again. So you can go through this twice, and at the same time, mere mortals just listen once. So avail yourself that opportunity. And then reach out to Dianna if she can help you. Buy the books. You can visit thesaleswhisperer.com, session 158. You can see the notes when you get there. And please, like I said before, leave a comment. Let me know that you're there. Let me know what you like, what you didn't like, what questions you'd like me to ask of maybe even Dianna can follow up via email or Twitter. We can have an online dialogue. Or if you know somebody you'd like me to interview, let me know. Put it out there, all right? And like I said before, visit thesalespodcast.com/nimble. Get that free trial with John. Let me know what you think. And as always, remember to sell different.